Mr. Moss, see, I come from Seattle, where we've spent a lot of effort politically passing initiatives for low-income housing, and we have had passed levies on almost a continuing basis over the last few years to build housing. And so we have a lot of low-income housing that is managed by a variety of public agencies in some instances, and sometimes by private nonprofits that are running them. And we've got Section 8 going on in our state like everybody else does. Tell me, from your point of view, the place where we ought to put our emphasis on low-income housing. Where should the money go if you're going to be the most effective? Is it in government building housing, as we did before Ronald Reagan, or is it in the low-income tax credit stuff in the 86 and thereafter, or is it in Section 8? Because I see us coming to a point where we're having more and more old people in this society who are going to be looking for housing as they are forced out by taxes and other things. I'm trying to figure out for the community, where is the most effective way, or what's the most effective way to put the housing up?
Well, first of all, starting in 1986, when the tax credit was put in place, the low-income housing tax credit, it started to replace all the failed federal programs that had gone on prior to that time. Programs that did not have the private sector involved, that did not have the private sector with risk in the game. And today, the low-income housing tax credit is the highest performing real estate class in the United States, of any real estate class, because of the private sector involvement, because of the state agencies doing the oversight and the underwriting and assessing housing need, and due to the nature of the type of housing that's being built, which is very high-quality housing. The programs from the past, the federal programs, are now being preserved using the low-income housing tax credit. They're being regenerated by bringing in the private sector.
You mean taking the old federally built ones and turning it into a low-income tax?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Bringing in the investors, renewing the project, making sure that the units are rehabbed in a sustainable fashion so they will last another 40 years. It's a very important role that the credit plays, is that it can play every position on the team. It can fix rehab, housing that needs rehab, federal housing. It can do new construction. It can build housing for those individuals that have disabilities. It can build veterans housing. It's a very, very flexible program, and I hope that answers your question.
There's one in Seattle named the McDermott Place, which has 54 homeless veterans living in it. So I know, yeah. I know about how it's done. But you didn't say anything about Section 8. Where does Section 8 fit in all of this?
Well, Section 8 is not an operating new production program at this time.
I know it doesn't produce,
yeah,
but it's a way of saying you haven't got a house, so here's a voucher, go find someplace in the private sector that'll take it. Is that a more effective way than building the building and operating it as a low-income housing?
Well, no, I don't believe it is. I believe that having the private sector involved,
the private sector is involved in the Section 8, aren't they?
They can be, where the project receives either project-based funding or vouchers to support extremely low incomes, which support the debt service for the property. But those federal programs also had subsidies for debt. When the properties are redone and rehabbed under the tax credit program, it's at conventional debt rates, and the vouchers and the subsidy provide subsidy to the renter, not to the property.
What do you think the deficit is right? Well, excuse me, go ahead.
On the Section 8 question, I agree. Prior to 1985, we did several projects, and those projects were Section 8-based projects. That was when passive losses were not a limitation, so we had all private capital doing those. We still have those properties today, and those investors are happy with that investment over all the years, but they needed the passive loss rules in order to get that deduction to bring that capital into the business.
That's correct, yeah.
But project-based Section 8 works better than vouchers.
All right. Mr.